Okay, so we have you coming up here talking now about the South Carolina. So you're gonna talk about how they're providing students and educators with integrated digital learning solutions. I think this is a really big idea, lots of legs to it. So hopefully you can get it all done in half an hour. But we're excited to have you both. So over to you. I know you're going to take over the screen and kind of show us what's going on, the two of you. We're seeing your screen.
Okay, good.
I'm going to turn off my video for now and just make sure that questions are going to get answered as you guys go through this. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for having us today, especially to the Learning Council. So what we just want to do real quick, I know it's a 20-minute discussion, but I think it's important from just my standpoint of being ex-CIO for Baltimore County Public Schools and now being the VP for digital strategies at Safari, is that we really started looking at the equity across the board, making sure all teachers, all students have access to digital content. And inside of our Learning Object Repository, we're making that happen. We can have multiple groups, individual students, or whatever that may be, and the teachers having, yes.
You have 30 minutes.
Oh, okay, 30 minutes, so good.
Okay.
So just, really taking that equity to the next level and helping teachers have access to all the vetted resources, either from, in this case, we're going to be talking about the state level, but also vetted resources from the district level. And then also with being able to teachers to have access to create the content and then go through an approval process. So that equity piece that you guys were talking about is huge. And I hear that across the whole US. Is that we have teachers that don't have access to it. We had teachers that didn't know how to get into technology and use technology. And as, like I said, the ex-CIO for Baltimore, I had teachers that kept saying, I don't want to use technology at all. Well, March came and now everybody had to use it, right? So it was kind of forced, but it was also important for us as a company to start helping districts get to that equity level. And to do that, we had to make it simple. So when I say simple, that means I'm integrating with your existing ecosystem and not having to make teachers learn more or learn something different. So one of the things that I'm happy to be with South Carolina is they have offered a learning management system, 5 different learning management systems out to the whole state. So we, as the Learning Object Repository, have integrated with all those LMSs. So now the teachers aren't learning something new. They're just going out to this vetted material that we've provided and South Carolina is providing to the students. And they're able to sit there and get it and make sure that it's vetted by the state, but also by the district level. So then that part too, to keep it simple, we also had to make sure it was in the vetted area, and that was aligning to all the state standards. We all know every state is not one size fits all, right? Every state has their unique standards and how they're going to apply them and how the teachers use them in a classroom. Again, I can't emphasize enough, keeping it in the center of keeping it simple for teachers, because they have been thrown out really very quickly to say you have to use technology, and it's not about how you used it in the classroom, because it is a different world of how you do it virtually. As we're all learning as adults, we had to do things differently to be able to access the virtual and be able to learn and be able to teach on a virtual atmosphere. I would rather be face-to-face with all you right today, is because it's easier. It's you get the body language from the group, you to get everything that we all get taught about how we all learn, and we all learn in different ways. So with that quick introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. DeAndrea, and she will really focus on the state level and how we're all working together to provide that for every teacher and every student in South Carolina. So Lee, back to you.
Thanks, Lloyd, and hello to everyone out there. And I am very happy to say that it has become a systemic partnership with Safari Montage in building what we call our digital ecosystem in South Carolina. Our state superintendent is very much of a systems thinker, and pre-pandemic, which seems like to me a long time ago, we had actually identified, as a result of a pilot project that had been funded by the General Assembly, the initial request was, could we provide seamless instruction on inclement weather days using some digital tools that some of the districts had in the classroom, so that there would not be this interruption of snow days or hurricane evacuation, et cetera, et cetera. And so from that study, we actually, Lloyd, if you'll advance the slide, we actually identified a system with 3 large components or 3 large categories. There, 2 more. There we go. One. There. We identified 3 large categories that were necessary in building a digital ecosystem. And this would apply, they identified it at the state level, and we took it and tweaked it for the state level. And that is, you have to have vision and leadership, and that has to do with expectations, financial planning, human resource planning, and being able to do the data analysis on the return on the investment for the different components. The technical infrastructure is where I'll spend most of the time today. The other piece is clearly the human resources and the professional development. The other 2 only happen when you implement with fidelity and teachers develop fluency. And as Lloyd said, it's easy for teachers. And by that, I mean, not easy in the sense of it's not a learning curve, but the learning curve is not so steep that they can't fit that into their existing delivery models. And in that technical infrastructure, we identified 3 big groups, if you will, that broadband, which in South Carolina is quite the issue. We have our multiple interstates that feed large manufacturing areas, either BMW or Boeing or Michelin. And we're very blessed to have very robust bandwidth in those parts of the state. But then we have some areas that literally, even with the purchase of hotspots during the pandemic, we struggled to get internet access. Of course, the hardware piece, I will say that in the pilot project, every district had a 1-to-1, and during the pandemic, through some funding from multiple sources, every student grade 2 through 12 now has a device. It took about 5 months to get them all delivered, but we now have 1-to-1 device in all 80-something school districts. And then this piece, the software platforms, and having those systemically work together, but having software platforms that delivered and provided and did what we wanted them to do. You obviously have to have a systems, a student information system. You have an LMS. Lloyd mentioned we had districts that were 5 and 6 years into their own LMS, and so they really did not want to make a change when the state looked at trying to identify one across the state. And so where we ended up was we have one large learning object repository where we are in the process of making that available, building those incidences at the district level, but making sure that the material and the content and the resources are curated. And if you'll go to the next slide, Lloyd, it actually fulfills 4 goals that we have in South Carolina. The first one is to increase the number of high quality resources. This directly impacts the equity issue. We have districts that can easily afford some high quality resources. We have some other districts that they could save for 3 years and probably not pay them. There's economies of scale, there's funding issues, and there's just lots of barriers. And so this repository overcomes that barrier. We are literally raising the basement, or raising the baseline in terms of quality resources. The third bullet, we have actually had a district in South Carolina that has been able to document that they saved teachers 2 hours of planning time a week. Once the teachers learned to use it, the teachers reported over a year-long process that it saved time. One of the key pieces of that was really meaningful and kind of a serendipity of that was that when they planned together, They not only saved more time, but they had higher quality lesson plans and resource searches. And we all know how important collaborative time is, and trying to facilitate that, as well as outline those expectations. And then in our LOR in South Carolina, we are in the process of putting in a whole library of professional development for teachers, so that, again, the teacher can log into their one single sign-on software in their district, and not only see student-facing resources, but teacher-facing resources. So Lloyd, we'll move on to the next slide. There's a graphic that just outlines some of the content I just spoke to, the South Carolina created, where teachers actually are creating model lessons themselves. We have developed a rubric that overlays our teacher evaluation system, so there is a standard of quality that we expect before it's actually approved as a South Carolina created lesson that goes into the repository. Our purchased materials, again, the PD library, and then we, of course, have 3 Safari open source resources. And so we encourage our teachers to see that there is a whole breadth of resources there out there in our LOR. Lloyd, you can pass through that one if you want to. If you can just go ahead, Lloyd, one more time. Thank you. And so as a part of a systems thinking team, clearly you have to have a PD plan. Just purchasing something and beginning to populate it is not going to get you there. And so we've developed an extensive, it's ongoing, it's pretty heavily dosed at the beginning of implementation, with both Safari, Montage, providing some professional development at the district level to both technical teams and to our curriculum teams. We happen to have also purchased Discovery Education statewide. They're providing some PD at the district and at the teacher level. Again, we have developed the rubric and work with NIET out of Nashville, Tennessee. They're providing some professional development. And then, what if you'll go to the next slide? I think there's a graphic there. Those are the 4 steps I just articulated. So if you'll go to the next slide, Lloyd, please. Yeah. And then probably the most critical part of this PD plan is that ongoing district level PD, that we are asking all of our superintendents, our chief academic officers, our district instructional leaders roundtable to really begin to focus on the collaboration and the time and the planning for the new learning environment. And I heard Lisa talk and mention several times, we're not going back to pre-pandemic days. For many of our districts, they had already started on this digital ecosystem journey. They knew education was changing, whether it's differentiated instruction, personalized learning. There are lots of terms that are out there, but the old sit and get and the old whole group, and looking at a flat textbook, that's not the environment of today's learner. So for those teachers who are early in the journey, it's essential at the district level that they provide that support and that interaction and those mentoring relationships and coaching relationships in order for the teacher to feel comfortable in using all the digital tools that we're providing them in the platforms, both at the state and the local level, but also to help them take ownership of it. Because we've said over and over again, there are a lot of digital tools, but nothing will replace the creativity, the judgment, and the professional knowledge that a teacher brings to that classroom environment. It may be delivered differently, it may look differently, but that's an element that it's an essential, whether you're in a face-to-face environment, a synchronous virtual environment, or an asynchronous virtual environment. And so we've just begun to talk about some of those we think we have a plan for this summer, but we have just begun to make our plans for fall and for the following school year, as well as summer of 22. Lloyd, I think there's one more. Oh, yeah. So that's in a short version, in a short time span. That's kind of the overall vision. Those are the components that we're trying to build in South Carolina. That's where we are with our lower building and populating, and the professional development that goes along with it. And I am glad to keep talking, or I'll stop and answer questions if you have any.
Well, I just wanted to share one more screen. Hang on a second. Let me get that working.
Yep, that's good.
Okay. So really wanted to talk to you a little further, a little detail about how we're working with South Carolina. And you can see here in the center is the digital ecosystem that we're really working with and how the state is concentrating on that piece. But to do that, you have to think about all the things that are around the edges, right? So one of the things that we're working with them is to start really focusing on all the different resources. If we look at the top left-hand corner, we know that the students have laptops. We know they may be iPads, they may be Chromebooks, whatever that may be. But on top of that, on the left-hand side, we're really focusing on the content piece. So as Lee mentioned, they did a contract with Discovery Education. So we've already now taken and working very closely with Discovery and bringing in the Discovery experience through Common Cartridge, which is through the IMS Global Standards. So with us being fully IMS Global Standard and aligning to those standards, we're able to do that. And Discovery now is all inside of the Learning Object Repository, again, keeping it simple for our teachers in South Carolina to access these resources. So we're now going through a bunch of other resources. You'll see McGraw-Hill, you'll see Pearson, you'll see OneDrive, you'll see all kinds of different things that have been identified by each district of the different resources they have. So we're going back with the state. We'll be looking at all the different content items that are coming through our needs assessment through 80 plus districts. And from there, we will start aligning all of the district lores with their existing content. So again, the teacher's not having to go to a separate website to get to this material. It's all within the state lore, and giving them that full ability to create the playlist, use existing playlists that the state has developed and vetted, and then also as the district has developed and vetted. So they're able to take that and add to it. We want teachers to have the creativity, because it's not one size fits all. So they're able to now say, as a virtual room, I'm going to take these 5 kids, give them this playlist, and then I'm going to take these 10 kids and give them this playlist. But it all meets where the student is at their learning. So, and we've also integrated with, if you see in the bottom left-hand corner, with a lot of the districts have Google as the classroom. I think I heard Lisa say that she was using the Google Suite. So we've accessed are integrated with Google to make sure that teachers didn't have to learn anything else. So when they're in looking at the resource, they're able to then say, push this to Google Classroom, and it gives them that list of where they want it to be listed in Google. And we've also done that with Teams. So really looking at that integration across the board, because as I mentioned earlier, the state at least has 5 different LMSs. They also have Schoology or Google Classroom, and they also have Teams. So a lot of different ways that we're having to integrate to make sure that top left-hand corner of that screen are giving access to those teachers very simple by the tools that they already know how to use. And that's where I was talking earlier about being simple, because if it's not, one thing I learned in Baltimore was if I put something out there and it wasn't intuitive to use, teacher said, I'm not using it. And that was, within 2 or 3 clicks. If it wasn't easy to use, they were going to hang it up and put it on the shelf and on the digital shelf and say it's not going to be used. So that's one of the things that we really focused, and Lee and her team is doing an outstanding job of bringing this all together for 80 plus districts. And we do have some great districts that are already kind of a forerunner out there. I know Pickens, if we want to pick on Pickens a little bit in South Carolina, they are currently a great user. They've got over 800,000 hits and logins already. And I can tell you, it's amazing how fast people are picking up on this. And we just implemented a district in January, and they have over 8,000 hits already. So, I mean, it is, again, it's just the show of how easy it is to use inside of a whole ecosystem that the districts are using, in this case, in the state. So at that point, I'll turn it back over, and if there's any questions.
Okay, so this is Leilani back on. I'm watching for questions. I want everyone to feel like they're participating and they're part of all this conversation. So what I want to bring up is that, you know, the idea of having a huge repository of things to choose from. Number one, what it saves time for teachers in is the Googling aroundness, which was even in our earliest research 5 years ago was a quarter of teacher time, but it went up in the pandemic because there were so many new districts scrambling around. So I'm really glad, Lee, you're doing this at the state level, because obviously having a unified resource that anyone can access into it's huge and a time saver. And I believe almost everything in there is pre-vetted. Am I right, Lloyd?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's huge. Otherwise, you can have teachers introducing these oddball things that turn out to be links that are break and are weird and questionable to share with young children, and all kinds of weird stuff happens. But here's the other thing, and that is that there's a certain number of districts and that are experiencing this teacher overwhelm. So the idea of, you know, truly personalizing, like you were talking about, Lloyd, it's great, but the time to do that doesn't really exist for a lot of teaching. It's just too much. We all know this because even before tech came in, teachers were having to triage, right? So the kids in the back of the room that needed remediation, it was a sacrifice of teacher time to really spend too much time on them because the other 27 kids may then fall behind. So every teacher in America quietly would triage. That's just the truth of the way the structure was, right? So there's this new sort of vein of let's be a bit more prescriptive and lay down some of the tracks from a more centralized level rather than a total lettingness of all teachers to figure out everything all on their own. Let's be a little bit more prescriptive. And I'm assuming, Lloyd, because of the majesty of the way that you guys have structured your navigation, that's easy to do anyway. You're just pulling it into the construct at the curriculum director level would be in the LMS using the back, right?
Yes, and that's where I think, Lee, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you really think about the time that teachers spend in one building, in one district, that they may be another teacher in another district 100 miles away, maybe doing the same thing, looking at how do I deliver instruction, or how do I take this lesson or this standard and provide it in a way that is unique for XYZ type of student, and then being able to upload those examples. So if I'm a teacher, I don't have to start from ground zero. I have other work that I have that's been curated from other teachers. It's like a great big repository of all your colleagues, literally thousands of colleagues who have meta-tagged, uploaded the lessons, meta-tagged them, and there I can search there, and sure, I can still in that LMS or in the LOR and through delivery in the LMS, I can personalize it even more or edit it, but I don't have to start at ground zero every time I start the planning process.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is it's not all completely atomized. It's like all the seeds are in the ground, but there's also some plants, fully grown plants that have been grown up. Your choice then, what you're going to use. You're just going to use this one-off video over here, or you're going to grab this lesson and use it whole cloth or tweak it.
Correct. We actually have some individual objects that are going in there. We have some lessons, some playlist or lessons, and we're beginning to have the conversation with Safari about putting whole units in there. Because in some of our very small districts, just having the team of teachers and leadership to plan a whole unit is it's just a steep uphill climb. But if you've got one that you could start from that another large district, had already done, how much better that is for the student in terms of what they're being provided in terms of a learning experience, but how much more time is the teacher saving in that situation? Yeah, so we're gonna have lots of options. It's like going to a really nice restaurant and you can have some off the appetizer, or you can have a big entree.
Yeah, with your dressing on the side, kind of a thing.
Exactly.
I love that analogy, Lee. Here's what else I really like about it is when we get to show you the statistics after this next video speed dating round. There's a lot of kids that have left the building of traditional public. And what I like about what you're saying is that I see a future where the individual institution can market the units, right? So that to the public face, it's like shopping at Amazon. It's like, I want my kid to go to this school because check it out. This is super cool. That ability to compete now is really important.
Exactly. And I'll just share with you we still have in South Carolina a seat time requirement, which we all know is very archaic, but this has been the best tool to show our legislators we don't have to have requirements anymore for seat time, because there are families who they might want to do one unit at a different time in the year, or they may want to be face-to-face for this, but I'll do this one, or my child would like to do this one synchronously, for all kinds of reasons. They're traveling, their parents are, have a job that takes them somewhere, they come back. We just think it's much more flexible and responsive to today's environment and population to be able to offer this flexibility.
Yeah, and it's a very obvious role the states should all be taking, but not all of them are. There's a lot of states, like California has a fully online charter attached at the state level, but they're not doing this. And they need to, because there's a new ground floor when you move to digital. And it's not a joke that there's a bajillion things to choose from. And the duplication of effort across every teacher in America is a little bit ridiculous. So I'm really glad that you're doing this. It looks like Chris McMurray has a comment in here. Chris, do you want to unmute?
Sure. Yeah. Hi. So as I listen to this, setting an appropriate floor is brilliant, and then making that floor low enough that everyone can access it. It's like you're scaffolding a digital transformation for folks, which is fantastic, because that removes barriers immediately. And it's brilliant. I love what you're doing. I wish that more states would hop on and do something similar, because it would help us get further faster, and it would help kids and teachers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also want to comment on the technology side. Lloyd, being familiar as I am with software and integration and all the other things that can occur, like every single time Microsoft does an upgrade, Google does a big switcheroonie on everybody, somebody changes a domain name, every single time that happens, your system has to do redirects and fixes, and right? Yes. The cost to do that, if it were leveled on every single school, would be unbelievable. They don't have the technical expertise anyway to do that knitting function of technical liaisoning between systems. So centralizing it obviously is a big idea. You've created a matrix, so just the upkeep, enormous expense. Am I right?
You are right. One of the things that we are running into with South Carolina is when you get into the smaller school districts in South Carolina, the staff is wearing multiple hats. So for them to be able to know how to keep the technology going is sometimes very difficult because they have all these hats they're wearing, as we know across all K-12. But with this centralized solution that the state's doing, this is giving us the ability to walk them through, show them exactly how it's going to work, but then we're managing it all for them so they don't have to worry about it. So the users are all in there. We've got that. We've got the permissions. We've got all the PII protected. So a lot of different options in there for our districts to not have to worry about and not have the staff that cost a lot of money to have programmers in the staffing to make that happen. So you're correct.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to remind people too, that from a technical perspective, and then we're going to move on to showing all our videos, is that the landscape of software constantly changes. Like every single software company you could ever work with is doing an upgrade, and it'll break links and send people to 404 errors quicker than you can blink an eye. And so the QA, the quality assurance job, is never over with any software company. And it also means that all those links are constantly needing to be updated. And you'll always have to deal with that. It's the way it is. Okay, so we're going to move on. And thank you profusely, Lee. You
Yes.
wonderful person, you. Yes, keep being so awesome. And,
Thank you.
you know, our best to South Carolina.
And
Lloyd, thank you so much. Why don't you go into chat right now and make sure everybody has your email address so they can ping you and harass you endlessly.
will do. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right.